Here we go again. I'm Defender Emerald, and I swear I've played first-party Nintendo games. Here's an interesting thought for you. Think back to when you're growing up. How often would you say you got video games? Sure, sometimes it could be birthdays and Christmases, those are almost always surefire bets, but for the most part, if you wanted a game, you were probably gonna have to wait for it. And if you were in a situation like mine, the family that you had weren't exactly the most savvy when it came to the hottest up-and-coming titles.
Thank God for Nintendo Selects coming in handy with high-quality games at good prices. But then you just end up getting screwed over because of factors outside of your control. Prime example, Super Mario Galaxy 2. Every GameStop I ever went to, didn't matter where, didn't matter what year, it was always $44.99. In hindsight, that makes even less sense because you could get it for $20 on the Wii U eShop, rest in peace. Then of course, there's a different issue. Being a GameCube owner in the late 2000s. I know this isn't a problem unique to me, the Wii and PS3 were notoriously difficult to obtain in the first few years, but unlike the PS2, the Cube didn't sell particularly well, and the highest quality GameCube games weren't exactly the easiest to come across. I swear it's easier to find a copy of Melee in the wild today than it was 20 years ago. All of this is to say, one of the many game franchises I never got to try as a kid was Mario Kart. The quintessential racing game, Mario Kart began life in 1992 as Super Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo. While it was a fun game for sure, there was a certain amount of nonsense involved that made perfecting it a bit of a pain. In late 1996, it entered the 3D space with Mario Kart 64, a visual upgrade and an overall better experience. But it still had some room to grow between the ruthless AI behavior and a drifting mechanic that can be generously described as erratic. Mario Kart Super Circuit, and then we move on to the GameCube. In 2003, we got the one and only Mario Kart Double Dash. The Mario Kart formula we know now was perfected right here. The computers, challenging but not unreasonable. The drifting control, pretty blissful. And the best part? The game is unique.
So kick back, relax, make sure your blood alcohol content is suspiciously low, hop into the most unstable Uber you'll ever get into, and let's check out Mario Kart Double Dash. Nintendo's most unique idea that they will just never do again.
Mario Kart Double Dash dates back to a GameCube test video from 2001, and by dates back to, I mean we have what appears to be Melee models driving around in carts over a back rooms paved with Mario Kart. In all seriousness, the audience seemed to cheer due to the announcement, but in fairness, Mario Kart was more of an invariability than a hype machine. We're not talking Metroid 64 here, think more like a 2010's Mario Party. It's in a much better place than the example, but the point is, Mario Kart wasn't groundbreaking.
Except this one was.
Somewhere in the GameCube's mantra of perfecting the 3D realm, the clunky, shockingly difficult single-player and engrossingly fun yet still clunky multiplayer racing series was one that received a conceptual overhaul with one simple question.
What if they went all the way on the idea of vehicular insanity?
Mario Kart Double Dash took the iconic concept that debuted 11 years prior on the SNES and decided to double down on everything. Quite literally, as a matter of fact. The unique selling point of Double Dash is right there in the title. The double characters, double the items, double the fun, so to speak. In practice, this is a more superficial detail, but I don't care, man. It's unique and it's fun and it's really cool. One thing of note in particular is the sheer absurd volume of items in the game. A lot of people attribute the overindulgence of adaptable obstacles to be a development that started on the Wii, but rest assured, it was birthed here. In all fairness, that was the angle that was leaned into with multiple drivers. Sure, it's a novel concept, but in execution, it's pretty much just what becomes the status quo in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Hold an item with one moron, drive with the other. Yeah, they can both hold items, but you have to strategize switching between them in order to utilize them. That comes at a cost, however. You can't hold multiple items at once in this game. For example, say you have a banana peel. In most Mario Karts, you can drift and drive around with it being held out behind you to protect you from an incoming red shell. Not so in Double Dash. Either move it or lose it. This goes doubly so with the triple shells, where instead of gaining a pseudo shield around you, you join up with the clown squad and juggle the day away. On the note of items, that's another interesting quirk of the double character idea. Every character has a partner, and every partner has a specific item exclusive to them. Mario and Luigi get some fireballs, Peach and Daisy have a little heart shield that acts the same as the spinning items do in other games, Wario and Waluigi get bob-ombs, a bizarre choice to be sure, but okay. They could blow up on themselves too, so it just kinda sucks. Bowser and Bowser Jr. get a massive shell that just kinda spins around the area you launch it at for a while. Donkey Kong and Diddy, the worst characters of the game, get a massive angry banana peel that breaks into many smaller, less angry banana peels when it gets hit. Yoshi and Birdo get an egg that acts similarly to a red shell. Toad and Toadette, the latter of whom debuts in this game, get the Golden Mushroom, which is a godsend in later games, and was introduced in 64, but they get to keep it all to themselves here. But you kinda slide around and turn too much for it to be particularly useful, so take the good with the bad on that front. Koopa and Paratroopa get triple shells exclusively because equality is dumb. Baby Mario and Baby Luigi get a chain chomp, which acts like the bullet bill of other games, but after a bit it detaches and acts like a green shell. And King Boo and Petey Piranha are also here. On the bright side, you don't have to use the pairs to get their items, as you could pair Baby Luigi and Toadette to get the Golden Shroom and the Chain Chomp, or pair up Bowser and Donkey Kong to lose.
I'm not bitter, I own a Wii U.
The items are hectic in Double Dash, but not impossible to adjust to by any means, especially compared to Mario Kart Wii. What is a bit difficult to adjust to are the controls in this game. So, I would consider myself to be fairly decent at Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Any speed, any stage, I'll definitely end up winning if not in the top 3. In Double Dash, maybe I'm just super unlucky, but I was sucking at this. It seemed that if I was in first place, some gratuitous nonsense would just materialize, knocking me off the stage twice and ensuring that I'll be so deep into 8th that I won't get out of it. Now, this isn't the game's fault, I've only played it a handful of times since I got it when I was about 21, but one thing I just couldn't nail down is the drifting. It seemed that if I was about to hit an item box on a drift, I would always slip right between two of them. This feels impossible, but maybe their hitboxes are a bit wonky. I gotta get good, I accept that. Let's move on to the good stuff.
The tracks in this game are awesome, for the most part. I'd say there's about a 60-40 split of the good ones to the bad ones, but the good ones really stand out. Let's go over them, shall we?
This is a solid introductory track, not too many frills, but you can run into a few opponents driving towards you in the opposite direction. There are a few ramps to slide around, and you can familiarize yourself with the overly generous drifting controls. I wish there was more to say about this, but it's the first race on a Mario Kart game. Overall, solid is about as good as you can be.
More like Peach, bitch. There, the joke has been made.
Peach Beach is interesting because it has a shortcut that honestly feels like it's messing with you. On the one side of the beach, you're surrounded by cataquacks from Mario Sunshine, which can flip your cart if you get too close to them. If you take the shortcut, you fall in the water and reset as if you had fallen off the edge of the track, because remember, water racing wasn't a thing until Mario Kart 7. Ironically enough, the incoming tide on the cataquack side doesn't affect you at all. If anything, I think you go faster in the shallow water than you do on the sand. That's a nifty little feature, have to respect it. Not the best track though. This is the best track in the game. A small oval. Yes, I'm serious. Baby Park perfectly represents what Mario Kart is at its core. Chaotic fun with items bouncing all over the place. 7 laps of madcap action where you will most likely pass people so often that you'll be in second place to yourself 3 sets of racers ago. I adore Baby Park, and even if you haven't tried it yet, do it. It's in Mario Kart 8 too, although it's a little bit different there. Either way, you really can't go wrong. Just watch out for your own items. Definitely a step down from the previous 3, but it's still alright. Dry Desert makes me understand Anakin Skywalker a whole lot more than I did before. Sand. It's coarse, rough, irritating, and it gets everywhere. It's really easy to fly off the road in this race, and it's even easier to fall into the quicksand vortex. Patience and racing aren't exactly the greatest combo in the world, but you'll need to have some synergy in order to succeed here. A very fun idea, but one that I feel is undermined by the rather floaty driving controls. Along the road here, you can bump into various types of cars, wiggler buses that hit you like a shell, bob-on buggies do exactly what you think they do, and you can ram into mushroom trucks to pick up their cargo and get a little boost. It's a fun idea and executed pretty well here. My problem is that the selling point of the level is surprisingly difficult to take advantage of. The titular mushroom bridge can be climbed up using some boost ramps, but staying on it long enough to take advantage of it is a completely different story entirely. More often than not, I try to stay on, but I just end up falling directly on top of a wiggler greyhound, making all of my effort for naught. In any case, it's an okay track with a few petty gripes here and there. I don't remember anything about this track. I think there's a bit with some bumpy roads towards the end. Other than that, it's shockingly bland. The piranha plants are fun, but there's another track in this cup that has some far more memorable relatives of them, so this ends up just feeling really shallow. Well done, Mario, you let your name to a good one this time. Easily Double Dash's flagship track. Very fun one. It's a wide open race with all sorts of fun little gimmicks. You've got moving tables and items, you got a fountain, but don't go into it. There's a little nook to get into the ship's mechanics and you can jet out of the propellers. It's a fun time. Although I will say that as wide as some of these spaces are, there are more than a few corridors where you just end up with 5 rows of bananas just lined up on guard. Most noteworthy example I can think of is right after you find the life preservers hung up like party streamers. Geez, Daisy, I knew you were a bit of an oddball, but this just feels egregious even for you. This is where the difficulty starts to crank up. Waluigi Stadium isn't bad at all, but it feels kind of painful at times.
And I'm not talking about the fundamentally broken cardboard cutout piranha plants.
A lot of fire in this level, and that can hurt at every turn. An obstacle course level in Mario Kart is honestly a pretty solid idea, especially considering the items inevitably turn lap 3 of every race into one anyway. It just feels like you don't have enough control in the air, falling into angles you really shouldn't, and this is where the opponents giving you love taps here really starts to stack up. All in all, it's a fair challenge with varying opportunities for advantage in ways that other races simply don't have. Out of place and wacky, not too dissimilar to Waluigi himself. And just like that, the game's quality falls off a cliff. Something about these last 2 cups cranks the AI to ridiculous levels and then just adds insult to injury. The tracks aren't designed well for the game's controls. Sherbert Land is a bit of a tough one because it's fine, more or less, it's just not that good. The freezies that move around to touch you right at the finish line are annoying and surprisingly appropriate greeting for how the rest of the game will go on. I don't want to dwell on it any more than this, let us continue. A course that I adore in concept, but despise in execution. This entire race has you driving against traffic, and the traffic is going way faster than you are. There are a few alternate paths you can take, and more than a few bottomless pits. And this is where I think I can finally explain why the back half of Double Dash drives me nuts. Your momentum gets annihilated so easily. An enemy taps you, you stop, you fall off a cliff. Lakitu takes forever to put you back on the road, and you take an eon to build up speed, but by that time another enemy has already sniped you point blank with a banana and you're in 9th place in a race of 8 characters. And believe me, once you fall off the stage even once, you've lost. No if and or but about it. And the funniest thing is, if I fall off once, I'm probably going to fall off about 15 more times in this race alone, and this is only the beginning. Ironically enough, this one isn't too bad. It's a racetrack shaped like Yoshi. A pretty nifty idea, all things considered. That being said, there's way too many items on this track, and this is where the whole sliding between item boxes thing became the most prevalent for me. No big issues besides that, there are a few overly banked turns, but you can deal with that in time. This is by far the most fun track of this cup, but that doesn't make it flawless. DK Mountain is the only track in this bunch that feels like a fair challenge. Of course, we have the DK Cannon.
My Junior, how much you've grown.
And most of the level is tricky and fun. The boulders towards the end of the lap can be a bit daunting, but if you stick to your guns, it'll come naturally soon enough. There are two issues I have with this race. The first is the bridge at the very end. I can't tell you how many times I've had this race in the bag, only to get knocked off the bridge at the last second.
That's on me. I'm a smooth-brained imbecile, and his Kongliness will punish me the way he sees fit.
Okay.
What's not on me is the ridiculously tight U-turn around a bottomless pit towards the end. There are a few of these here and there, and none of them are all that tough, but this one in particular just seems to be the catalyst for nonsense. Whether it's too tight to avoid stuff like banana peels lighting the edge, or just the fact that if you drift too early you meet Queen Jadies in the underwear, it feels too difficult to do what the game wants you to. Wah, I weep. This is a rough track, both in design and aesthetic. I'll be real with you, it's not particularly bad, but it's a massively long one. But it is only 2 laps. There are quite a few really fun bits of this course, my personal favorite being the funnel loop here where you can drift all the way down and still somehow not get the boost out of it.
Because of wah.
In all seriousness, this feels like one of the most fair challenge tracks in the game. It's by no means easy, but compared to some of the other races in this cup, it's fun enough. Not my favorite though. Aw man, I love Scalar. Dino Jungle is weird because it just makes no damn sense. Sure, Yoshi's a kind of dinosaur, but why is a Brachiosaurus here? He's living his best life, that's what he's doing here. We're the invaders and I'm asking why he's here? I really am a jackass, hee-haw. This is a fairly generic track, and similarly to Peach Bitch, it does have a shortcut to items which feels like nothing short of self-sabotage. I like the concept, thematic discrepancy be damned, but all in all, this is another one that's kind of white noise. Beware the stomping dino, lest he Monty Python your ass. Remember what I said a moment ago about Wario Colosseum's difficulty? Well, I'd honestly say that Bowser's Castle is the most challenging but fair course in the entire game. Sure, there are opportunities to crap out, but they never make it seem like it isn't your fault. If you fall off the course, you didn't drift hard enough, or you drifted too hard, or you got hit by a red shell in midair and fell into a fireball, dropped into the lava, and had Lakitu screw you over again. All reasonable things to get good. There are a lot of tight turns and obstacles all over, and none of them feel overwhelming. Even the thwomps don't slow you down as much as you would think they do. So, steel your nerves and drive like the mad Koopas or men or toads or Kongs or weirdo flower tomboy you are. This is the road, this is the rainbow road. This is the road that just blows.
I hate this damn stage.
It's just not designed well. Sure, a lack of railings isn't explicitly a bad design choice, but there's a reason that the Super Nintendo version has stood the test of time. This is just damn unfair. Every single turn is banked, with most of them having speed pads on them, yeeting your gormless asses into the final frontier, kickstarting Mario Galaxy 4 years early. Nothing about this track feels like it was designed well. There's another cannon in this one, and for some utterly baffling reason, once you get out of the thing, your momentum just ceases. Finito. Done. You stop. The track tries to trick you with speed pads as soon as you land, but if you've ever tried to get back to business after that launch, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not exactly a mystery to me why this one is the only home console Rainbow Road that didn't make the cut into Mario Kart 8.
Speaking of Mario Kart 8, that brings up a certain problem with this review I'm doing. See, I'm fully aware that Mario Kart's biggest selling point is the madcap multiplayer fun you can have with all of your friends. But in case you haven't noticed, I'm lonely. As a result, I can't judge Mario Kart by that standard because I have no way of doing any sort of scientific method of tracking that down. Instead, all I'll say is that if you have a GameCube and $100 lying around, definitely give it a shot, you won't be disappointed. With that out of the way though, I'd like to bring up a different avenue to discuss here. The tracks that made it into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now, a lot of these stages are all completely iconic and they're great for their own sort of reasons. But I think they were all, at the very least, slightly upgraded in the upgrade to 3D. Redundancy. Be that as it may, I'd like to discuss the differences between the originals and the new ones.
So, first things first. I am aware that Mario Kart 8 has some noteworthy fundamental design differences to Double Dash. First and foremost, everybody's single.
Finally, playable characters I can relate to.
As awesome as the Double Dash system is, this is the way that ultimately flows better. Secondly, more varieties of karts, and as introduced in Mario Kart Wii, you can drive a bike. The latter speeding up the game infinitely. You're not capping out at 30 miles an hour in these bad boys. Beyond that, you have Mario Kart 7's addition of being able to drive underwater, which snaps Sherbert Land like a twig. It's kinda nuts how much the track is altered by that one single decision. And last but not least, there are 12 racers instead of 8, or 16 and 8 karts, whichever you prefer. With that in mind, these stages are significantly wider than they are in Double Dash, the most obvious being DK Mountain. That tight U-turn is basically a non-issue here. Still easy to swing off the stage in this one spot, but other than that, it's pretty legit. So let's discuss the good and bad of this nostalgia bait. Dry Desert is vastly similar to its original incarnation. It might not suffer from the wideness issue that some of the other tracks do, but it's still challenging. The quicksand vortex isn't as strong this time around, and the bumpy area towards the end has been filled up with water, becoming a sort of oasis, perhaps a reference to the original Paper Mario. Wink wink. Either way, it's a decent enough reimagining of a track I really don't give a damn about. Daisy Cruiser is interesting. This one feels significantly more lively and fleshed out than the original, if that makes any sense. First and foremost, the tables in the dining hall all have Yoshis and Shy Guys just sitting there chilling, enjoying a spot of tea while rocking around in the rough seas. You can drive through the fountain right at the beginning of the track, which is now populated with Goombas swimming with little life preservers. Wholesome little detail there. And of course, the engine room is underwater now. This ship is going under, and Daisy couldn't care less. This is a definitive upgrade of a track, and considering how enjoyable the original was, that's really saying a lot, and how this is going to be immortalized for the rest of Mario Kart history. Well done. The piranha plants are even more fake looking now, but somehow that makes them even more endearing. There's a lot of Waluigi Stadium that feels more fleshed out and reasonable than the original. You got some anti-gravity ramps to do tricks off of and land these platforms above the stage, granting you items, coins, and if you're savvy enough, you can even save yourself from a couple of bad jumps here and there. Overall, not a fantastic track, but a much more enjoyable one to be sure.
Was it? No, I didn't have home field advantage. What the hell are you talking about? Oh.
Okay, right off the bat, I hate the original, and this one is better just because you can ignore all the nonsense and jump into the freezing cold water. After you do that in real life, you can do it in the game. This track is the wildest compared to the original, and it really does just sandblast all the challenge out of it. The only really tough bit might be the ice column in the tunnel, and that's really not saying much. I would say it's a definitive step up from the original, but it's still not anything better than the 6 out of 10. The original tried my patience, the modern one is absolutely nothing. It's quite a dichotomy, and it is all crap. This track feels completely unchanged from the original. It looks better, sure, the Mario Motors paraphernalia everywhere makes it feel more like a real place, but you're still just racing around Yoshi's Tungus with piranha plants chomping at the bit to get to you. It's a fun idea, but there really wasn't anywhere to go with it beyond what was already established. An overall solid track that's immortalized in the modern day. Godspeed. This is how to modernize a GameCube track. The challenge is still there, a little bit less with the turns of the drifting system being much more refined, but it's still there. Kong barrels are scattered throughout the track, and it's your job to avoid bumping into them as much as possible. There are a few anti-grav ramps here and there like Waluigi Stadium, but overall it's a very similar and modernized track. Although the bridge moves much more noticeably in this version, but I'm like 90% sure it's an optical illusion. I didn't really notice any turbulence. And last but not least, we have my favorite track, Baby Park. It feels exactly the same. If anything, multi-lapping your opponents is even easier here because of the drifting. I would like to mention that I got hit by a blue shell from a racer that was driving literally right next to me. That made me laugh far more than it should have, and that's Mario Kart item stupidity in its purest form. Baby Park, in particular, actually reminded me of another tweak that makes Double Dash look a bit archaic. I was bitching and moaning for most of the game about this, but if another racer so much as touches you, it just kills all your momentum. Not so in Mario Kart 8. If anything, it's a good thing, because it gives you a burst of speed with a little spin move. It's really cool. Regardless, this has always been one of my go-to tracks. If I'm ever casually whipping through a VS Cup race when I have some free time, it's always Coconut Mall, Baby Park, Excite Bike Stadium, Yoshi's Island. They're all a ton of fun, and this has always been the linchpin to the lunacy that these 4 races provide. Absolutely fantastic, no notes.
And that was Mario Kart Double Dash. Was it everything I was expecting and more? No. I do think it's a pivotal step towards Mario Kart being playable single player, but half of the stages really aren't designed for it, so it kind of shoots itself in the foot on that regard. That being said, the USP is fantastic, and it sucks that this has never been a thing in Mario Kart again. Crash Bandicoot ripped it off, why can't Mario Kart do it? With that in mind, I do think there's a certain charm to the fact that it's a one-of-a-kind experience, and I feel like if they ever did it again, it would be kind of disappointing. Even though I don't expect Double Dash to ever come back as a sequel, Quadruple Dash, dare I say, I would kind of like to see it return as its own mode someday, specifically just because I think the multiplayer would be absolutely absurd. Also, I neglected to mention the bonus disc. That's not really relevant at all, it's just a bunch of demos thrown on here, which is nice, but nothing more than that. But if there's one thing I learned throughout this entire experience, Mario Kart Double Dash is a sentence, and not even a grammatically correct one. Why are there 2 exclamation points?